Jesus, I just thank you for this group and how you've drawn us to you, first of all, because you love us so much, but then you're so giving that you're sharing us with each other. Thank you. Thank you for sharing us with each other so that we not only can enjoy you, but we can enjoy each other. We can be a part of this team, that we get to minister with you. We get to join you as you're ministering to people and healing them and setting them free, just like you've been doing us. I just thank you for this time. I thank you that with you there's never any condemnation or judgment. You're free of all that. You love us as we are, and you're so gracious and so caring that you accept us just as we are. And then you invite us to come and grow with you. And it's not a we have to, it's we get to. We get to be free and healed, and now we get to grow. You take us on the greatest adventures as we do. So I just give you this time today. In your name I pray. Amen. Okay, so when someone comes to us for ministry, they're not bringing their high, are they? Let me tell you, best thing happened. That's not what they're coming with. They're coming with the hurts and the struggles and the things that are bothering them and the things where they feel stuck and where they want to move on but they can't. And so our first priority when we minister to people is to offer them a safe place. Because we've all had those times where we've wanted to be able to turn to someone and that did not go well at all. And that taught us lots of things about don't do that. What's wrong with you? You shouldn't be this way. Quit making it a big deal. And it makes us pull in and hold things in. And it's kind of hard to get healing that way, because if I'm holding it in, Jesus is not going to come and grab me and say, you will tell. You know, he's waiting. He's waiting for us to come. So having a safe place is like the very first thing we want to be able to do when we're ministering to anyone, is have a safe place for them. So when someone comes to us for ministry, what do? We invite Jesus into that time because he is our safe place, but also because we're joining him, we want to be safe too, right? Because we're like Jesus with skin. I thought that many times, like, I know Jesus is here, I just need some skin right now. I need some skin, and that's what we're here for. So we have different ways and means when we're ministering to people. You know, we address the generational curses, the healing the wounds, learning their true identity, going against the roots and the lies, and then going into deliverance. But I went to a conference about 6 weeks ago, and I learned about a new tool that I've never heard of as a tool before, and it just really struck me. So the next morning after I was in this conference, I texted Andrea because I thought, oh my goodness, this is huge. Can I share this? And so she graciously said, yes, I would love for you to come share what you've learned. So that's what I'm doing. I've had lots of anger over the last 2 years of things I've experienced that I'd never experienced before, and a lot of anger of like, I'm really mad. Why didn't anybody tell me this? I really needed this decades ago, and why didn't anybody tell me? And so then one day I was thinking about it, and I thought, okay, who am I mad at? And then Jesus kind of did this, and it was like, I am mad at Jesus. Why didn't you let me know all of this years before? And so I'm sitting there, even though Jesus did nothing wrong, he was the one I was blaming because I couldn't pin it on a single person. And so I had to work through, you know, like we do that forgiveness with him. But there have been several times where it's come back up again, and he'll say, Kristi, are you ever really going to forgive me for this? Sorry, Jesus. Sorry. But I say that to say I have it really in my heart when I'm learning and experiencing something that's changing my life, is I don't ever want anybody coming to me saying, you knew, why didn't you tell me? So that very much drives a lot of what I do right now. Is not that everybody always is like, tell me more, you know, but that I don't want anyone to ever be able to look at me and say, why didn't you tell me? What they do when I tell them is up to them, but I want to at least know that I didn't hold it in, that I shared it. So this tool that I'm going to share with you today is the tool of validation. And I have never heard that kind of tool before. I've been through the heart guarding training like we all have. I went to the school of ministry for a whole year, but I never heard this one. And so it just really caught my attention when I heard this. So what is validation? Validation is seeing someone and hearing them and understanding them. And it's talked about a lot, like the last 3 years, it's become something that's talked about a lot. It's on my feed on social media, probably because I'm so interested in it. But a lot of times people are really good at hearing the facts and the details when we're telling something. They get all that, but they don't hear this right here. They're not hearing us. And so that's what validating is. It has nothing to do with facts and details. It has to do with hearing someone's heart and what they're sharing. So I heard you say magical. This week was magical, and that word stood out to me. That's how she describes her time with Mary, and especially on the sailboat, that it was magical. That was her heart. It wasn't a fact or detail. It's what the week meant to her. Do you understand what I'm saying? We have a lot of people come to us and they have a lot of shame. And that's what keeps us from ever doing anything about the things we're struggling with a lot of times is the shame. So the antidote to shame is acceptance. And when someone experiences validation, they are experiencing acceptance. And it's very powerful. When we validate, we're being safe for someone to open up and share the entire breadth and depth of whatever it is that's hurting them, of that pain, is to be able to fully share it. And then when we validate, we honor and we respect it. And that is what we often never get, is the respect. Someone will dismiss or deny or invalidate or say, that's not that big a deal. Why do you keep talking about that? When are you going to get over that? None of that is respecting what we've been through is real. And then a lot of times what we end up doing is we keep telling it over and over again because you're not hearing me. You're telling me this isn't real. You're telling me it's not true. You're telling me I shouldn't feel this way. So I'm going to tell you again so maybe you can hear me again. And then it just becomes a cycle. Mm-hmm. To validate is to hear and to respect. This is what you've been through. This is how it's affected you. This is how it's made you feel. And it's a skill, which everything that I've been learning, I love this because nobody's born with this. You're not wired for it. It is a skill. And the good news of that is no matter how good or bad I am at it, I can become really good at it because it's just like tying my shoe. I don't have to sit there and remind myself and talk through tying my shoe because I know how to tie my shoe. So if I'm not great at validating, if I've never experienced it, if no one's ever modeled it for me, so I don't know how to do it, it's not a problem. It's just a skill and I can learn it. And if I want to get really good at it, I can. It's just going to take practice and that's it.
Hallelujah. That's a good thing.
It is.
Because sometimes we think people are born with those skills, but really maybe they had parents that modeled it since they were a baby. So it became part of their second nature.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas others.
We talk about that in Thrive, that whatever was modeled for you growing up, you learned how to do because that's what your people did. So if you grew up in a home where your parents or whoever did this, you won't think of it as a skill, you'll think of it as normal. But if you grew up in a home where you weren't ever allowed to share anything, or it was bad when you did share it, and so you learned not to share, you didn't learn it because they didn't model it for you. A lot of the groups that I'm a part of right now, the word says there's nothing new under the sun. So I've thought about that a lot of this sounds really new, but I thought there was nothing new under the sun, but it feels like this is new. And the way they described it is, we've never had terminology for this before. I mean, throughout the history of mankind, people have either had or not had these skills, but we didn't call them skills. And it's just the way they're being referred to now as these are skills. If you don't have them, not a problem, you can learn them. If you do have them, great, use them well. because they help you in your relationships. And Jesus is really good at this. This is what he does for us. You know, when we go to a memory and there's pain there, what does he do? He joins us right there. And Jesus never shames us for what we're feeling. He doesn't shame us for our pain or our hurt, or he doesn't do that. He accepts us, and he understands why we're feeling what we're feeling. I've had so many times where I'm going to a memory, and when, you know, and like I'm turning and I'm trying to prove to him, because I felt like I've had to prove to people before, like I have to prove that this really hurts, whereas people are telling me that shouldn't hurt. And when I turn to Jesus and I tell him that, every time he says, I know, I was there, I saw what happened, I know exactly why you're hurting. And that's him validating me. He's validating that my pain is real. So I love that Jesus has this. And we're gonna look in the Word in just a little bit about it. So in order to be able to validate someone, I have to be able to hear and recognize what they're feeling, and I've got to be able to name it. And so, again, going back to how we were raised, some of us have great emotional vocabularies and some of us don't. But it's just a vocabulary. So just like any language, if I never learned an emotional vocabulary, like a big joke in my marriage all these years, my husband always said, like, he had the 8-box Crayola box of emotions, and I had the 64. But he didn't have that. He only had like 2, but they weren't emotions. It was, I'm hungry or I'm tired, and those aren't emotions. So he actually really had none. But it's because nobody taught him. So the good news is, we can grow an emotional vocabulary if we don't have it to find the words for it. So I have 2 daughters that just had babies in the last 7 months, and that's one of the things I've told them is, as your little boys start growing and they're expressing emotions, name it for them. You know, say like, are you mad right now? And let them know this is anger. Or are you sad right now? And it helped them to learn the words, just like they're going to learn the vocabulary in the natural, to be able to say, this is what I'm feeling.
And as they grow up, widening it. Do you feel embarrassed? Are you feeling embarrassed right now, or whatever? Because
like
I
inside
think
out too,
you see,
right?
yes, but you'll see adults who still are with the mad, sad, and whatever, you know, but not actually recognizing, oh, this is jealousy I'm feeling. Oh, this is embarrassment or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Anger was never tolerated in my home. We were never. You got in big trouble if you were ever angry, and so nobody was ever allowed to be angry. And so in the last few years, been trying to work on this. And so my husband would be upset. I would say, you sound angry. He said, no, I'm just frustrated, which would make me want to punch him with anger. But I finally got an emotion wheel, and I was able to show him that's actually a flavor of anger. You're feeling anger. It's just a flavor of anger. You know, and because he didn't have the vocabulary, it was like, well, I can't use that word, because you're not allowed to feel that. So I'm going to tell you this one because it's allowed. It's like, they're both okay. It's okay if you're angry. It's just an emotion. But it's growing that so that you can, and so you can communicate with each other. So when someone comes in and they're sharing something with us, sometimes they're really good at knowing what they feel, and sometimes they don't know what they're feeling. They just know they're overwhelmed. And anytime we feel overwhelmed, it's being overwhelmed with an emotion. It's just we don't always know what the emotion is. You know, have you ever, like, when you're crying, why are you crying? I don't know. You know, I'm overwhelmed to the point where I'm crying. I'm just not really sure at the moment what is it that's overwhelming me. Well, how is anybody going to validate that if I don't even know what it is either? Right? Yeah. Okay, so vocabulary. This is my point, was it's just a vocabulary, but it's really helpful to have a vocabulary. So validating statements when we're ministering to someone and as they're sharing is we're saying that we're looking and listening, and the nonverbal is huge. Words is 7%, but the nonverbal is 93%. So we're looking at their facial expression, we're listening to their tone of voice, we're reading their body language. You know, when someone's fidgeting endlessly, that right there is a clue. They're feeling something really strongly. Am I able to tell what it is they're feeling? So we're paying attention to what they're sharing with us, but we also want to pay attention to the nonverbal, what's going on there, so that we can let them know, I hear you. I hear you, I understand, I know what you're feeling. So there gets to be a point where we can tell them that. Wow, that sounds really frustrating, or wow, that sounds so terrifying, or I'm trying to find what is the emotion they're feeling and let them know, I hear you, I hear what you're feeling. And sometimes that's not what they're feeling, but that's not a big deal, because if I tell someone this is what it sounds like, then they can let me know, actually that's not what I'm feeling is this. And that's okay. Now I know. This is actually what they're feeling. So now I do know, and that helps me. And then also another key to pay attention to is how strongly they feel it. So like someone, like on a scale of 1 to 10, it could be a 2, or it could be like an 11. You know, that's when they really are overwhelmed with whatever they're feeling. How intense are they feeling it? One of the things we know when Jesus comes in and heals the memory is, you know, how we have them go back to the memory.
Check your heart.
Yes, check your heart. Is there anything still there? Sometimes there may still be an emotion there, but if it was a 10 and it's at a 2 now, that still is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean like, well, here, I'm not through fixing you, you know. It's just, it's still going in the right direction, and that's okay. So a huge key in this, in listening, is not talking. And sometimes we want to jump in and rescue, but they're not going to be able to share if I'm doing the talking. And I heard a study that said, you know, different cultures are different. In America, we pause, like when someone's talking and then there's a pause before the next person speaks. In America, the pause is an average of 1 second. But in Japan, it's 8.
Wow.
And so I sat there one day and I just watched my clock to just be, you know, like, what does 8 feel like? And it feels huge.
That's a long time.
But it's just because it's the way our culture is. And I thought that was just neat to think, there's not a right or wrong. Every culture is different. It's just, we're real quick to jump in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it may feel like, wow, we're sitting here saying nothing for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know why, but I'm good at that. I'm good at just sitting there. And I can sit there and there can be a long, it doesn't make me afraid. I did this at Teen Challenge because I would ask a question and they did not, it was like a question going down and they didn't want to go there. And I'd have, you know, a lady look at me and she'd say, yeah, I don't know. And I would say, it's okay, we're not in a hurry. And then I'd just sit there and they would hate that, but it was like, no, this is important.
Mm-hmm.
Not important, I don't need to know. You need to know the answer. This is going to help you for you to come up with the answer. And I think just doing that all those years, it really helped me to grow that ability. I'm comfortable sitting there. I'm not in a hurry. Take your time.
Well, and everybody processes differently too,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to give them the space for that.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a friend or family member that has taught me this because he, like, we'll be on the phone and I'll say something and then there's like this long pause and I'm waiting and then he'll come back with something and it's like such a long, there's a lot of pauses and I've had to learn that he processes differently.
But it's also a huge gift.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people who haven't been allowed to share, they're used to that. When someone actually just sits there and is glad, I'm glad to give you all the time you need, that's a huge gift for some people.
Mm-hmm.
They're not used to that. Okay, so as part of validating, we want to be able to recognize what someone's feeling and to let them know, you know, I hear you, this, you know, this sounds like this, you sound like this. It seems like this is what you're feeling, and so we're letting them know, I am paying attention to your heart here, not just the facts and the details, but the heart. And in doing that, we get to get rid of all the judgment of, well, that's stupid, why would they feel, that can't be what they're feeling, they shouldn't feel that way, which is never helpful. But, and again, I don't know if it's just our culture, but we're really good at it. We're really good at judging what somebody like, well, that's not what I would feel. And one of the things I have found out in the last 2 years is I feel hurt and sad real easily. I very seldom feel mad. I very seldom feel that, unless it's my husband, which is my fault. You know, I'm not blaming him, it's my fault. But there'll be lots of times that I'm sharing things with him and he'll say, that sounds so frustrating. And I'll say, no, It just made me really sad. But we've done that enough where I've realized I don't get angry very often. I get sad. That's where I go to. So you can't be with me and validate what I'm feeling if you're misreading me. So it's a skill. And we can do that. We're like, well, this is what I would feel, so this must be what they are feeling. But if we want to know them, we want to hear, but actually, what are you feeling? It doesn't really matter what I would feel in this situation. That has nothing to do with it. And especially in ministry, you know, my feelings are irrelevant. This is not my story. This is the other person's story. What are they feeling in this is what I want to know, because they're the ones receiving ministry. Okay, so one of the things I learned is that this conference I went to was on complex trauma. So this was people who have gone through a lot of trauma, and that this is like the first powerful tool we can use to minister to someone in trauma, is validating them, because so many people, especially who have been through complex trauma, have never been heard. They've never even been allowed to tell. They've carried around things that no one's ever known before. And they're not going to feel heard until they're validated. So that's why it's so important. And for some people, because they've never been allowed or whatever to share, it's kind of like sometimes a dam can almost feel like it's breaking. Like they start telling, and then as they feel safe and they see from our response, I really am safe here. They're not judging me. They're not arguing with me. They're being safe for me. Then it's like, oh, there's so much more. Can I let it all out? And we want that because we want them to have full healing. I ministered to someone who, you know, you have this like, it's not in the paperwork. There's nothing in the paperwork, but it's the first session and we're just doing the interview. That's all we're doing. And all of a sudden we go into a memory in the middle of all that, just like Jesus does. And she's sharing about an abortion she had. And it was gut-wrenching. And she said in that, I've never told anyone this before. But what I found out months later was she's had a whole bunch of them. And it took everything she had just to tell that one. But because she felt safe in that session to let that one out down the road, then she was willing to go really into it and share about all of them that she had had. And the validation was so important there for her to even realize, I can take a risk and I'm going to get help, right? So it's really important.
I've seen people, I think validation's huge when you just acknowledge, like, hey, what you went through was really hard. Like, just acknowledging that, because I've seen it where people minimize their story. They minimize and say, well, you know, my dad, he had an abusive father or whatever, and they start minimizing what happened to them. But when you give them that permission to say, hey, what you went through is actually really hard, and, or, you know, just validating in that way, and then it gives them the permission to acknowledge their own pain almost, rather than just like, well, you know, other people have had it way worse than me. That's minimizing your pain and what you've gone through. So that validation I've seen be really, really powerful in those situations.
Well, if you think of when we go into memories and they invite Jesus into the memory, and then they have that time where they're giving all that pain to Jesus, everything that they were feeling, when they minimize it, or that's been whatever, if I minimize it like, well, it's not that big a deal, I don't really have anything to give it.
Yeah.
And what that means is it's still going to be there because I couldn't even admit it to myself, much less to somebody else, which means I don't have it in my hand to give him. So it's a really big deal. And we're kind of like the conduit. If they feel safe with us, then that's going to help them get to him so that they can share it with him. Remember, the greatest pain any human ever feels is attachment pain. The pain of feeling all alone. Not being alone, but feeling alone. And so when we validate someone and we're able and willing to hear them and to be with them in it, like we're not like, you need to stop, you know, we're not going to do that here or whatever, but I'm willing to be with them in that pain. I'm resolving that attachment pain. which is a huge component if they're going to get to Jesus and connect with Him. So fun neuroscience, because I'm really big in the neuroscience, is when we validate, validating releases oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone. It's like when you give birth and when you're nursing and whatever, it's called the love hormone. When someone experiences being validated, it's an automatic physiological response. The body releases oxytocin, and that helps resolve the attachment pain, and they will feel relief. You can feel it in your body. You can feel relief because of that hormone. Conversely, if someone is trying to open up and share, and we start giving advice, our body releases cortisol. Is it cortisol? Yeah, cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Which is why when I'm trying to share something I'm struggling with someone and they start fixing me, trying to tell me what I need to do, I'm going to feel worse. Physiologically speaking, I'm going to feel more stressed and more anxious because my body is releasing that.
Don't they teach this in like trust-based intervention, like for adopted kids? Have you guys heard this? You're hitting me here because like with kids, we do this with our kids, right? But that's what they say with trust-based interventions or whatever. It's about validating. So it's really hard when one of my kids comes to me and they're telling me a story. It's so like far out there, or like their perspective on it, and I want to fix or catch the lie because I can recognize that they're lying. But like a counselor has had to tell me like maybe not to correct every single lie, but to maybe I might have a different perspective on it, or like I can see how you saw it that way, but but it builds that trust. And when I'm trying to fix them, it's more detachment.
It does.
That's
it really
super hard.
does.
That's super hard with kids, with our own kids.
We'll
probably do it easier with somebody else for sure.
The key, or one of the keys with validation is not agreeing. Has nothing to do with agreement. Agreement's not even in the equation. It has to do with acknowledging this is what you experienced. This is, like if we were both there at the same time, and what you experienced is not even close to what I experienced. I'm not agreeing with you when you say this is what happened. What you're saying is this is what happened to me. And only one person can say this is what it was like for me. I can say, well, it wasn't like that for me, but that's not in play at the moment. They're telling what it was like for them. This is what it felt like for them. Maybe their view of it, or maybe they misinterpreted or whatever. But the point is, they want to be heard. This is what it was like for me, right? And that has helped me just in my own life of understanding it's not about agreement. I'm not even looking for agreement when I'm looking for validation. I'm looking for you to hear me. This is what I've experienced.
Wow.
Can you acknowledge and respect? Can you respect that this is what I experienced? What were you going to say?
As a counselor, I feel like, as a minister here, I feel like I've done that so well, but thinking about my own child and just an incident that happened this week, we sat and had a very long conversation that took a lot of prayer and compromise on my end, because I was not, now I'm recognizing I was completely invalidating everything that he was feeling, and I didn't notice it in the moment. I was just being very factual. He was only 6, and I'm just like, that sucks for him really bad.
Frankie, we've all done that as parents. I've done that so many times, and we do that out of fear. We get afraid for our kids that they're going to go down a bad road, make bad choices. So instead of validating, let me correct you, let me fix you. And when we do that over and over, they just turn us off and don't listen to us anymore, because if we don't care how they feel, why would they care what direction we're giving them? So.
Well, how many times have you been ministered to someone and they've gone into a memory, and then, Jesus comes in and they're with Jesus, and we'll say like, Jesus, will you tell me the truth? Or Jesus, will you tell me what you saw? Or will you tell me what you want me to know about this memory? And every time we do that, he shares his perspective of the very same experience they just described. And his perspective is always different, but he's not arguing. He never comes in and says, you're wrong. That's not what was happening. I had a woman who we were doing lies, or what I believe about myself, my identity, and one of her statements was, "My legs are fat." And so, I honestly looked at that one and I thought, well, this is going to be interesting, because what's Jesus going to say? And I was ministering to her online, so I could only see her from here. So it's like, I have no idea what her legs look like.
Show me your legs first.
I got no.
Well,
but it was
they
good
are
because
fat,
it
so
didn't
move on.
matter. It didn't, it didn't matter what I thought. But anyway, that was one of her statements, was, "My legs are fat." And so when we got down to that one, and she said, "Jesus, what do you have to say about this?" He said, "Your legs have taken you all over the world to do missions for me. And I say you were beautifully made," which is the word.
Oh, that's pretty.
And so she just sat there in that for a minute. And what he didn't do was say, "You're wrong." He didn't shame her, like, "Don't talk about your body that way." He just said, "This is what I see." And what I heard him say was, "I see your legs differently," which is not the same as saying you're wrong. He was just saying, "I see it differently than you do." And she received it. And so she was like, "That is so true." And so she sat there for a couple of minutes telling me of all the missions trips she had been on, and her legs had carted her in different countries, whatever her legs looked like. And it was like, she couldn't argue that. And Psalm 139, you're beautifully, fearfully, and wonderfully made. She couldn't argue that, because she knew that was the word. And so she was able to receive that without having to say, "I was wrong, I'm bad, I shouldn't have said that." It was, both are true.
Yeah, that's powerful.
That's cool.
So I say that to say, a lot of times when we're going to family members and they're sharing that their experience was different than ours, it's not about a right or wrong. They're simply saying, "This is what it was like for me. This is what it felt like for me," right? And on that, all I need to do right there is just hear them and respect and value. "I'm so glad you told me, thank you." And then just be with them in that, whatever it was. So I'm going to go for a minute to John 11, where Lazarus has died and Mary and Martha are there. Jesus finally comes and he meets with Martha and they have their little conversation. And then he gets to Mary. And I find it interesting that they both said the same thing to him, but he responded differently. So I have lots of questions about that. But we don't have the 93% to know, what did that look like? But anyway, so when he's with Mary, and it says, "When Mary looked at Jesus and saw her weeping at his feet, and all her friends who were with her grieving, he shuddered with emotion and was deeply moved with tenderness and compassion. He said, 'Where did you bury him?' And the people replied, 'Lord, come with us and we'll show you.' Then tears streamed down Jesus' face." And I see this as a picture of Jesus joining Mary in her grief and validating it. Now, he's getting ready to raise him from the dead, and he knew that. He knew the whole time what he was getting ready to do. But he didn't shame her or argue or tell her she shouldn't feel that way. He joined her and he cried with her, even though he knew what he was getting ready to do. He validated that what she was feeling, her grief, her sorrow, was valid. And I just love that about him. I think that's one of my favorite just pictures of him. And that, I don't know about you, but when I go to him, that's what he does with me every time. He doesn't ever shame me for what I'm feeling or tell me you misunderstood or you misinterpreted or you're taking it personal. He never says that to me. I don't know, maybe he doesn't to me. He always respects and validates what I'm feeling. And then he says, "Can I share something with you about that?" And he'll tell me something that will help me in it.
And he does it so gently.
Yes. So one of the tools that we learned in the School of Ministry I went to is called VCR, and it stands for Validate, Comfort, and Recover. And the recover is the part where you bring something to help someone, and that's where we normally jump to first. We want to fix it. Let me give you advice. I know what you need. From the second sentence out of your mouth, I know exactly what you need to do. And we jump to that, which is always not helpful. But instead, we validate first, and we comfort, and then we recover. And so what that looks like, I mean, we're sitting here talking about the validating, but the comfort is, I'm here and I'm with you. And I'm gonna walk with you through this. I'll be here with you. So you're not alone. And that resolves the attachment pain of feeling like I'm all alone in this. And then the recover is something as simple as, so what would help you right now? And that is respectful. You know, if someone's, this is not ministry necessarily, but if someone's coming to me and they're sharing with me, but they haven't asked me for advice, they're just sharing. So instead of my telling them, this is what you need to do, I respect them by asking. I don't tell them what they need, I ask them, what would help you? And it lets them come up with what would help them, because I don't know. I may think I know, but I don't know what someone else needs. But if I ask them, it's really respectful. It shows respect to them.
That's good in all of our relationships.
It is.
It really is, especially in marriage. You know, to just put that out there instead of assuming what they want from us.
Yeah, to ask, how can I help you? What would help you right now? What can I do to help you?
I preface it for my husband. I'm like, hey, I don't need you to fix anything. I don't need you to do anything. I just want you to listen. I just preface it for him.
I just need validation.
What was that thing we talked about in the car? Was it this morning or yesterday? You said you were complaining about something, and I was like, there's no literal way I could fix that situation.
And I was like, I wasn't asking you to fix it.
Yep.
I was just voicing like.
I mean, there's nothing I could do to fix it, but
just hear me.
I just need. Yeah, I like the preface. Like, if you're just because we're boneheads sometimes, just I don't need you to fix
Your
this.
natural
I'm just,
tendency is to fix.
I'm just vocalize it, and then I know that I don't need to fix it.
And I think most of the time, maybe all the time, our heart is to help.
Yes.
When we're trying to fix, we're doing it because we care.
Right.
Because we want to care. But the point is, that's not what they're coming for.
Yeah.
And maybe they will have a point where they'll say, so what should I do? But they need to be heard first.
Yeah.
I need to know, do you care? Because if you're not willing to hear me,
And
then
I won't
you don't
be able to
care.
hear you.
Then you don't care. Now I'm a problem. You're looking at me and I'm a problem and you're going to fix me, and that makes me feel even worse, that I'm a problem. I was coming to you with a problem and you're telling me I am the problem. It was like, oh my goodness. Note to self, don't go to that person anymore. Okay, so what does that look like when we validate? Kendra is going to share a little story.
Okay, I came up with two.
Okay.
The first one, I took our students that don't have jobs to Cane Creek Park the other day. We had plenty of time to walk the trail, but we got really sidetracked. And I wound up losing track of time and had to go pick one of our other students up from her first day at work.
Oh no.
So I had to leave Crystal, who's the one, she can't really get around as good as it. I had to leave her at one of the bathrooms so we could basically run to the car to pick her back up, and was still late picking Ellie up. Totally dropped the ball, you know. I felt a little irresponsible. I felt like I had shown the students a bad example of good leadership and good time management, and I guess I felt like I had just kind of failed as an example to them in that. You want the other one now?
No.
Okay.
No. Okay. What did you hear?
I felt like a bad example.
What you failed?
Yeah, failure.
Is
You were
that
condemning yourself a little bit. Maybe that's what it's saying.
I was thinking false expectations. I don't know if that's too much to grasp. Nobody's meant to be perfect, so it's okay that you mess up once, because it's not like you do that often, right? So I hope nobody else said that.
we're looking for the feeling, but in the false expectations, what was she feeling though?
What'd you say?
What I heard was I let these ladies down.
So what was the feeling?
Shame.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
Disappointment in
Disappointment.
yourself.
Would you say those are accurate, or would you use other words?
That's accurate. I was kind of embarrassed too.
Okay, so when we're in a memory, what are we taking to Jesus? We're taking the feelings, because the feelings are what are painful.
Yeah.
Like shame, I'm feeling shame. That's an emotion. I'm feeling it. That's the pain. You know, feeling disappointed. I'm disappointed in myself. That's painful, to feel disappointed in myself. Embarrassed. I'm feeling embarrassed. That's painful. So when we turn to give those things to Jesus, we want to know what is it we're giving him. Otherwise, I can't give it to him, because what did I give him? And then when he does the great exchange and he says, what am I going to, what are you going to give me? What would you like to give me in exchange? That's part of what we want them to be able to see. Instead of feeling embarrassed, Jesus gives me this. Instead of feeling shame, Jesus gives me this. Instead of feeling disappointed in myself, Jesus says this. I want to be able to see what was exchanged so that I can receive it. You see what I'm saying? Because we can't do an exchange if we didn't give him anything. Right? Okay. So was that easy for you to hear her?
I feel like I need to work on my vocabulary because I was feeling what she was feeling. I'm like, now I'm feeling like pressure and like I have put this expectation on myself. Like I can connect with emotions, but I can't verbalize them well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was struggling with.
Good. Okay. All right. You ready for round two?
My other one?
Mm-hmm.
You were there for this one. So in women's prayer meeting, I made a comment about Peter being the rock on which the church was built, and I know better than that. And I was obviously corrected by a woman that I love dearly and who did it in kindness and love, but it took me a minute to fight off the offense. I was embarrassed, I felt stupid, I felt small, and I was really angry at myself and that woman for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that for you.
Yeah.
It's legit.
Well, can I ask a kind of irrelevant to what Kristi's saying, but why is that wrong? Because Peter was the rock.
Jesus is the rock the church was built on.
Oh.
Peter means rock. But see, it's
He
something.
called him rock.
Right.
It's
Jesus said,
was the
I
revelation.
built on the revelation
Of
that you said that Jesus is the Son of God.
on this rock. He meant the revelation that you've had of who Jesus is.
Right.
Is what it is.
But what you were saying was God used Peter
Right.
to help
Yeah.
establish the church.
Yeah.
Like we
People
knew
say
what you were
stuff like
saying,
that all the
but
time.
The correction was brought a little bit harshly.
Okay, so what were the feelings that she just said? Because she listed those off.
Stupid, embarrassed,
Small.
angry.
Small, angry, small, angry.
Maybe vengeful.
Okay, so then that's just as simple as saying, wow, that sounded painful. That sounded tough. Naming off whatever you're hearing to let them know that you heard it, and it gives them the opportunity to say, yeah, that's what I was feeling, or actually it was a little more like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so it helps us hone in more on it so that we have that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So see, there's vocabulary involved in that, and there's also listening. What am I listening for? What am I used to listening to? What am I listening to? If it's someone in my life and whatever they're sharing, I'm starting to feel defensive, I'm not going to hear real clearly because now it's being filtered through my defensiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I feel like they're saying I failed or I messed up and that's hitting a nerve in me, then I'm not going to hear clearly. So we always talk about, sometimes we hear in ministry through our own pain. If it touches something that we've also experienced, then that's something we can at least be aware of. Am I hearing this clearly, or am I filtering it through my own personal experience? Which goes back to what Rose said several months ago of, we want to be the most healed people as ministers. The more healed we are, the more clearly we can minister without it coming through all of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's always more.
Mm-hmm.
You just never know what's going on. Yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
What you just said, Kristi?
Going to-
Oh, now here?
yeah, that one right there. Or you can go upstairs if you prefer.
Oh,
Um,
go here.
So I was just gonna say that when we have those moments, and we all do, and it doesn't feel good, because nobody wants to feel corrected in front of a whole room of people. It might not even be that severe. It might just be something out of the blue that triggers us in some way, right? That is an invitation into encounter with the Lord, to take those feelings to Him and say, Lord, why did my heart respond so violently to this?
Why did it trigger me?
Why am I so triggered by this? And allowing Him, just doing what Kristi's just saying, the exchange, and taking those things out and giving it to Him so that we can get that whatever it is healed. And even feeling it for you says to me, oh, I probably have something in me still that needs to be healed. Because none of us really want to feel, we don't want to feel embarrassed. We don't want to feel, we don't want to feel, what did I think this morning? I had this thought. I have a fear of feeling stupid in front of people. That I did something stupid in front of people. And it's still a fear, right? We can justify it according to our human nature, and yet the reality is I still have a fear that the Lord wants to heal. Because I should not live in fear of people's opinions, right? So we use those triggers as a symptom of, oh, Jesus wants to heal this in me.
And it has nothing to do with our value or worth.
No.
At all.
No. But it is based on our life experience. That I was probably embarrassed young in life, or something happened, or I didn't feel heard, or maybe a lot of times it comes down to our families didn't know how to treat us and they embarrassed us. And we developed a fear of looking stupid in front of people. And so that place needs to be healed and realigned. We all have those places.
So this is important for ministry. It's a really important tool for ministry, but because it's a relational skill, that's important for life, for any relationship we have. So it goes, I think with most things, it goes both ways. The things that it's important for us, the way we treat someone in the ministry room, we should be treating people the rest of the time too. You know, because this is who we are. You know, who am I? What kind of person do I want to be? When someone's coming to me and they're wanting to share something painful like that, do I want them to be glad they came to me, or do I want them to regret it and say, okay, I'll go find somebody else to go to because I can't come to you because now I feel worse. You know, who do we want to be? Do we want them to be glad? And that means we want to hear. So if I'm doing something because I think I have to, or if I'm doing something because I want to, it changes everything. One's an obligation, and the other one is out of a desire, right? And so because when you look at your relationships, we want to have close, loving relationships, then it becomes a desire. I want you to feel safe to come to me, and I want you to be glad you came. And unless you're coming, you know, I have done that in my marriage of like, if I need you to fix something, I'll tell you first sentence. It's my first sentence, and it happens 2% of the time. You know, if I don't say I need you to fix something, then don't even go there, because that's not it. That's not what I'm looking for. And I came this morning and I was like, hey, I've got something I need you to fix, and his whole face lit up. It was like, yes, this is my forte.
It's my moment.
This is my moment.
The music's playing and he said, da, 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 da. The Rocky theme song.
Yep.
It's like, let's go. I get it.
Okay, so I want to look at a couple of hindrances to validation, and we've mentioned some of these. You know, number one is never experiencing it growing up. If I've not experienced it, first of all, I'm not going to know what it is. I may think I know what it is, but if I haven't experienced it, I can't really say I do know what it is. I just think I know. And having someone to harm it, to model it in harmful ways, is going to affect how I look at it, how I value it, and whether I want anything to do with it. Fear is a huge hindrance. Being afraid that someone else's emotions are bigger than I can handle. So there are times where someone will start sharing something and they're going into a pain that's bigger than I can handle. I don't have the capacity to go there. And I won't necessarily consciously, but subconsciously, I'm going to try and keep them from going any further because I can't go with them. And that goes back to how healed we are is hugely important to be able to minister. I want to be as healed and have a great emotional capacity so that I can join someone in what they're feeling. Otherwise, I'm going to try and rescue them and pull them back out. And so I heard a story of Dr. Jim Wilder is somebody I follow, and he was in a ministry session with a counselor and someone. And so the person was sharing, and he looked at the person and he said, I bet there's even more than that. And the counselor started fidgeting. And the person said, yeah, there is. And so he started sharing more. And when he got through, Dr. Wilder said, I bet it's even worse than that. And he said, oh, yeah. And he broke down crying. He started telling more. And the counselor couldn't stand it because the counselor didn't have the capacity to go over the depth. It wasn't really the issue, the subject. It was the depth of the pain he was going into. The counselor couldn't go there. It was too much for the counselor. And so the point when he told that story was, we want to be as healed and have as great a capacity as we can because we minister to people who have really heavy things. And if we're going to be there with them, we want to be able to go with them where they need to go so that Jesus can heal that. And then the unhelpful responses, we've talked about some of these. Teaching instead of hearing. Using words to try to make the feelings smaller or disappear. Brene Brown says sometimes we silver lines things, like we try to put a cherry on top and make it good. But we still haven't even acknowledged the pain of what they're talking about yet. We're too busy trying to make it where it's not that bad. Sometimes we'll try to spiritualize everything. And not that there's not a spiritual component, but they need to be heard for the pain first before we go there. And then sometimes we'll turn around and we'll start telling our story because it's hitting us somewhere and it's pulling up something in us. And so then before we know it, we're sharing, oh, I know what that's like. And then we start telling our story. And now it's not about the person we're ministering to. So our number one goal as prayer ministers is always to connect them to Jesus, to get them to Jesus because he's the one that heals. And he knows what they've been through. He knows the depth of their heart. He knows the things they've never told anyone else. Our part is to be with them so they feel safe and to let them know that we care. And we're going to go there with them so that then we can take them to Jesus and let Jesus do it, but we're there with them. I ministered to someone recently who moved here a year and a half ago from Ukraine. She came right when the war started there. And we had a struggle with the language barrier. She had to keep Googling to try and find the English translation of what she was saying. So it was, I hurt for her, but there was nothing I could do except I just kept sitting there. Like, you Google until you figure out how to say it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be right here with you. And she never stopped talking the whole session. And we were about 2 hours into it, and she still hadn't stopped talking. And I started feeling that, like, okay, we got to get somewhere. I got to do something. I got to help her with this. How do I not interrupt her or cut her off? Because we're not going to get anywhere with that. And we never did get anywhere. I couldn't even get her to Jesus. And I left feeling so discouraged that it's like, if I could just get her to Jesus, if nothing else, let me just get her to Jesus. And I couldn't even get her to Jesus. And when she left, she was exhausted because she cried the whole time. And I felt so bad because it's like we didn't get anything done. But now that I've learned this, that how powerful this is, I look at it differently and I see I'm the first person here in this community that she's been able to sit there and just let her say it. And she didn't even get through it all, but let her say 3 hours worth of it. That was more than she had before. And Jesus has her. And he really cares about her and he really wants her to be healed. So it's not like well, too bad. You know, it's just how it looked to me. But what's interesting was I saw her at church Wednesday night, and I haven't seen her in a while. And I've been wondering, you know, is she okay? Where is she? And she came up and had the sweetest smile on her face. It ministered to me. It was like, oh my goodness, you know, you look so different than you did when I went in. And Jesus has been working with her, and he's ministering to her. And so it just really encouraged me that regardless of what it looked like to me, I gave her something she hadn't had. I didn't give her what, you know, I was like, well, we're supposed to do this, and we didn't even get to this. You know, that was my understanding. But I gave her something that ministered to her.
I have a question. It's not directly related to what you were saying, but it is related. Do you feel like that it's as effective to minister like on a Zoom call or, you know, whatever, some kind of, is it as effective as being in person in a room with a person?
I think that's a great question. When I started with that in the School of Ministry, I did not think it was going to work at all. I just was like, this does not work. And Jesus just kind of looked at me and he said, really? You think I'm hindered by technology? And I have seen incredible things happen in ministry online. I have been shocked. But basically what it came down to was, it wasn't that I didn't trust the technology. He said, you don't think I'm big enough to work through this, and he is. I really have.
That's
Because
very
I like to be like this. This is hugely important to me. I was like, how are we going to do that on a little bitty screen? But
There are caveats to that though, because I agree with everything Kristi's saying. Like, Jesus shows up, and I've seen him do miracles from 1,000 miles away. But there are certain situations where people need a lot of deliverance, and they've been involved in the occult or suicidal tendencies, things like that. Those kind of people I don't minister to online unless they have a spirit-filled intercessor in the room with them.
yeah,
Because we've seen some dangerous situations
And
where
then
demons have
not
taken
there.
over.
yeah.
Yep, and there was no one in the room to
That makes a lot of sense.
help.
Okay.
So there is, if someone is healthy enough, or we're just doing inner healing, that's one thing. But if you're doing a deliverance situation, different situation.
Okay.
And it's always helpful to have someone interceding with the person on one side and someone with the person on the other side.
Yes. Yeah. And it's also it's protection for you as well. You know, when if they're hundreds of miles away, and I've seen some pretty scary things happen.
Yeah.
So.
That's really good. I never thought about that angle, but yeah, that's very helpful.
Yeah, I ministered to someone in Oregon, and she had demons telling her to kill herself all the time. And so before one session, she went and got 2 people to be with her at my request. I said, I need people to be with you. So I agree with that. When you're doing that.
Right, because I learned that the hard way. When I first started doing this, I was ministering with another minister, someone that the other minister knew, and through a group, but this woman had DID and lots of demons that were tormenting her, and she went to the kitchen and she got a knife, not a knife, but a X-Acto blade, and had it held up to her neck.
Oh wow.
Whoa, how'd we get
I
here?
needed some
missed
ministry
this.
after that.
I'm ministering online.
It was
Wait a
demons-
minute.
Ministering
It
online.
was
Oh,
demons
okay.
of control and manipulation. That and all they were trying to control us, and we did get it back under control. But that's when I learned I will never minister to someone in that situation that I don't know unless they have a spirit-filled person in the house with them. I won't do that again.
Wow. Okay, that's good.
So let me take it back for a minute to more of our personal lives, because I watch this a lot, just because it's a big deal to me. I have been in conversations where someone is sharing something, and then the next person immediately changes the subject, starts talking about something else. Now, if you're just chit-chatting, I'm not talking about that conversation. I'm talking about if someone has a need, like I'm struggling with something, like this is going on. I need help, I'm really struggling with this. When that happens, it lets the person absolutely know I wasn't hurt, because no one even acknowledged anything I said. So, not that there was anything to fix again, but it's always helpful when someone's coming to us or they're trying to share something to let them know we heard them. And so that's where the being able to let them know I heard you. Is this what you're feeling? It sounds like you're feeling this. You know, is this like, are you feeling this strongly? Is this a big deal? Is it not a big deal? How much is this bothering you? I care. And you're focusing on their feelings. That can help a person, even though you never did anything to change the situation. Because a lot of times people come and you can't, like you say, there's nothing you can do. They're not coming to you. You want to help, but there's nothing you can do. But doing that right there, letting them know you hear them and you care, actually does change everything. Because if you resolve the attachment pain and now they feel like they're not alone, it brings everything down. Just like when we go to Jesus, you know, when we know that Jesus hears us and he cares, it brings the intensity of it down. It's like, okay, I feel better. I feel relief, you know. Oxytocin's kicking in. And
It's almost like that's why there's so much power in like AA groups or other similar groups, because it's that validation of like, I get it, I've been there. You know, when you get around people that are experiencing it, it's an automatic validation. Whether they say it or not, you know, they've been through it, and so there's power in that.
Yeah, we've got some issues in our family, like everybody does. And I have a daughter that, I have 4 daughters, but this daughter, we've had the most between us. And we were, I went and got some healing and got some ministry before I went out to see her. So thankful, because when I got with her, we had like an 1.5 hour long conversation about this subject we had not been able to talk about. We hadn't talked about it in 1.5 years because we just couldn't. Like, we would get so locked up. And I sat there and I just basically, I never even shared my side. I didn't need to. I just, it was like, I didn't even care at that moment. It was like, just tell me what this is like for you. Tell me what it's like for you. And it was hard to listen to her, because a lot of it had to do with things that I had done, and just hearing the effect of things that I had done, whether I meant to or not, that this is how it affected her. It was hard to hear, but I was able just to sit there and listen to her. And at the end of it all, I was able, and I know it was my nonverbal, because I pray over my nonverbal all the time. I'm like, Holy Spirit, will you help me to convey love? You know, will you help me with my face to convey love? So, I mean, honestly, because I know my face is not conveyed that all the time. But I was able to convey that to her at the end. And I asked her, I said, do you feel like I heard you? And she sat there for a minute. She said, yeah, I do. And I said, good. Because I said, I really want to hear you, and I really want you to feel it. And I said, I want you to know I respect your position. I respect how you feel. I see it differently than you do, but I fully respect this is how you see it, and this is how you feel. And I want you to know I respect that. And I'm not going to argue with you on this. I respect how you feel. And we have never, in her 30 years, had a conversation like that. And what changed, I can't speak to her side, but what changed for me was I went and got ministry and got healing of the wounds that were in my heart, so that I could be free to hear her. And I knew that. I don't know that she said anything different than she's ever said before, but I heard it differently because of the healing that I had had. And so this issue's still here, and we still see it very differently, and we still think it should be handled very differently, but we're good. And that, to me, is what really matters. Is I don't want anything to come between us, and we're not going to agree on everything, and that's okay. As long as we're still good between us. And I asked her that before I left. I said, are we good? Because I don't want anything between us. And she said, yeah, we're good. And that was just huge for me.
How did that conversation come up for you guys? Did you bring it up?
I'm not sure, but I don't think I did. Maybe I did. I don't know. It was not planned on either of our parts. Maybe it was Holy Spirit.
That's what I was fixing to say.
Because we were just going to a coffee shop to have coffee, and we sat there for an hour and a half, and I mean the time flew by. But we stayed on the same team.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she's growing on her side too. I'm sure she is. But I know for my part, I got healing. And I don't know, I can't get over like all these people like had so many problems, you know, it's like I know exactly what's wrong with you, and I keep finding out like, oh, it's me. It's me. I'm so hurt. You can look at me and I cry because I was like, it's me. I just have to laugh.
Something I've
I
learned.
can identify with that
Can you?
in my own life,
Yeah, me too.
yes.
What did you say, Lori?
Said I identify with that.
Yeah. I resemble that.
But again, it goes back to what Rose said of we want to be the most healed. The more we're healed, it changes everything.
Can I admit that that's terrifying for me, you know, because having to be, needing to be healed in order to help people get to their healing. Because, you know, I'm real good at looking put together. I'm real good at looking like a good example. But like you're saying, like we need to be healed in order to be part of ministry for Jesus to work through us.
And that means I actually need to not look like it, but to actually be it. And there, I've discovered there's a lot of boxes I've got. Like I've done all this inner stuff and I've worked on a lot. But there's these little things I've tucked away. Like I'm not ready for that one yet. Jesus, we're gonna put it over here in the corner and let it get cobwebs and maybe we can't see it. But it needs to be dealt with. It's still taking up space. And that's kind of terrifying for me. I really applied for this training today. Hear that stuff.
You're not alone.
It just means you're human.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just means we're human. And I just, for me, I just find that freeing to say, it just means I'm human.
What did you say?
I understand what you're saying. I felt that myself.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, you were gonna say something.
How was I gonna go? Just as we're talking about like in our relationships, something that I've learned to do, and this has been helpful in my marriage, but also in all my relationships, is again a prefacing thing of when I'm gonna deal with a difficult conversation, I'll preface it in a way of saying like, okay, what I'm gonna say, I'm not necessarily saying this is facts or this is how it happened, but this is what I felt and this is how it made me feel. So like, this is how I perceived it. I'm not saying that this is how it was or this is what you actually did, but this is how it made me feel. And that seems to bring a lot of walls down, especially with somebody close to us, because it doesn't come at them with like an aggressive tone of like, you know, it made me feel this way. If I just come in saying, you know, I felt this way because you did that. So I just preface it of like, hey, I'm not saying that that any of this is valid, but this is how I'm feeling. Like this isn't necessarily facts. Because I can acknowledge that. Because sometimes our feelings aren't actually what happened, you know?
Right.
But it's how and that's helped a lot in relationships, mainly in my marriage, because that's, you know.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, like there can be times when we feel rejected, but that doesn't mean we are rejected.
Yes. Yeah.
It can both be true.
Mm-hmm.
So someone can do something and that's not what they're, that's not
that
even
wasn't
in
their
their
intent.
mind,
Yeah.
and yet it can still feel that way.
Yeah.
And to me, what helps with that is to go back and say, it's not either or.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually both and. This is what you did and you weren't trying to reject me, and also it made me feel rejected. They're both true.
Yep.
And so in that, you're saying, I'm not saying what you did is wrong at all.
Yeah.
I'm simply saying this is how it affected me. So someone can comfort us even though they didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
They're not saying it was wrong what they did. They're just saying, wow, I hear you. This is how it affected you. And oh my goodness.
Right. I'm
Yes.
sorry you feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
it
doesn't
just
have
seems
be
to take
sorry.
the defense down.
Mhm.
It gives that space for it. It welcomes it.
Mm-hmm. So good. All right. Anybody have anything else? Thank you for listening.